They said that in the empire of Caelum, a person's life began at birth, but their existence, the part that counted, began at 17. It was dawn over Alta, and the white stone towers caught the early light and threw it back at the sky. Below, barely visible through iron grating and morning haze, the Undercity sprawled iron and timber and repurposed stone. Above the central plaza, the reckoning hall floated. Among the white-clothed citizens walked Kael Arden, 17, lean and dark-haired, his clothes clean but worn in the way clothes get worn when they've been washed too many times. He walked with his hands in his pockets and watched the excited faces around him with an expression that could have been mistaken for calm. It was not calm. It was distance. Everyone was calling it the first day of their real lives, as though the 17 years before today had been nothing but a rehearsal for the moment they found out what they actually were. He thought about his mother. She had sat beside him on a narrow bed in a cramped room, dim in a way that had nothing to do with the light, a black brand on her collarbone, radiating outward like a dying star. Despite the brand, she had been smiling. She told him that whatever they said he was, he shouldn't let it be the whole of him. He had held on to that. His mother's sentence had been that she was someone who was extinguished. She had gone out slowly, like a candle that knew it was dying. A girl with copper hair pushed through the crowd toward him. Mirasalis was 17. One arm in a sling from a training injury she didn't fully explain. Grinning with the effortless confidence of someone whose world had always been large enough to move through. She told him he was going to be late. He said he knew. She asked why he was standing there, looking like he was at a funeral. He said it might be one. She told him he was so dramatic that whatever he got, it didn't define him. She mentioned that her father always said. He pointed out that her father's sentence was that he was someone who protected. He said it was easy for him to say. Her smile faded. She knew he was right. She told him to come on and said she'd go up with him. Inside the reckoning hall, the space was vast and white and curved, like the inside of a bowl turned upward. At the center floated the Arbiter, enormous, robed in silver cloth with no texture, no seam, no fold. Its face was a smooth, pale oval of stone, with no eyes, no mouth, no expression. Citizens approached one by one, and a tendril of silver light flowed from its outstretched hand to each person, lifting a glowing sentence above them before it dissolved into their chest. Each citizen descended in new color. Kael stepped onto the dais when his name was called. The silver tendril extended. It wasn't pain. It was the sensation of being read, someone turning pages inside him, looking for the sentence that defined the chapter. And then the tendril stuttered. Not a tremble, a stutter the way a record skips. The light pulsed erratically. In the space above Kael where his sentence should have manifested, there was nothing. Not darkness, not absence, just nothing. The Arbiter went still. Officials noted quietly and with poorly concealed alarm that in 300 years, no one had ever seen an Arbiter go still. The Arbiter's featureless face turned fully toward Kael. Every person in the hall felt it in their chest, like a change in pressure before a storm. Officials stumbled back, citizens pressed walls. Mira froze at the edge of the line with her hand over her mouth. Kael did not back away. The Arbiter withdrew its hand, rose several feet. Then its voice came not as sound but as pressure resonating through every chest in the hall. It declared that the soul could not be weighed. It stated the soul had no nature. It said it was null. What followed was quiet chaos, the kind that spreads slowly, and is more frightening for it. Officials sealed doors. Guards drew weapons. The Arbiter rose higher, retreating to the upper space of the hall. And Kael stood on the dais alone. No sentence glowing above him. Still white. A small white room. A table. 3 officials on one side, Kael on the other. His hands rested on the table, palms up. The Grand Registrar read from a file. He noted the subject was Kael Arden, 17. Undercity born. He noted the mother, Sora Arden, deceased. Sentence, extinguished. Father, unknown. He described it as a remarkably ordinary file. Kael said he got that a lot. The church official explained that the weighing had produced an unprecedented result and that the Arbiter had convened with the High Council. He stated that in the meantime, the subject would remain in the room. Kael asked if he was under arrest. The church official said he was being evaluated. Kael filed that word away. It was the polite word for, they didn't know what he was and it frightened them. The soldier asked straightforwardly whether Kael felt anything different since the weighing. Kael looked at his hands. He said no. He was lying, beneath the table. His palms registered something new, a tingling, like standing at the edge of something enormously deep and feeling the updraft from it. Through the frosted glass, the enormous shadow of the Arbiter moved in the hall beyond. Every official straightened involuntarily. The Arbiter's voice came through the walls. It declared that the boy had no sentence because he had no fixed nature. It specified that he was not unweighed. He was undetermined. It stated that voids did not remain empty. It said they fill. The soldier slid a document across the table. At the top, Kael's name, one word stamped in red. NULL, below that, threat assessment pending. He picked up the document, folded it, put it in his pocket. He asked if he was free to go. The soldier paused, then said yes. Outside, Mira was waiting. Her clothes were now deep violet, a color that had weight, subtle and unmistakable. She saw his white clothes. Still white. She moved toward him and said his name. He asked what she had gotten. She told him quietly, without bragging, that her sentence was that she was someone who stood at the threshold. She mentioned that it was rare, that it conferred wide-range spatial and boundary manipulation. She said they had told her it was a broad sentence. He told her it was. Incredible, he said truly. She told him not to be gracious right now and called him an idiot. She asked what they had said. He handed her the document. She read it. The violet glow around her dimmed slightly, as if her new sentence understood the gravity of what she was holding. She said, quietly furious, that they were sending him to the Undercity permanently. That they were doing it because he was undetermined. Because the Arbiter had, he told her it was because he scared them. She didn't argue with that. He walked the long winding road from the upper plateau to the Undercity alone. Streets became alleys, became tunnels, became the cramped maze of the lower tangle. Through gaps in the iron overhead, golden spires were just barely visible above. Getting smaller. He noted that he had made this walk 1,000 times. He observed that it had never felt like exile before, because he had always believed he would earn his way up eventually, get a powerful enough sentence, build enough of a life. He noted that the road felt different now, like a door locking behind him. The Undercity was immediate and permanent in its own way, fires and barrels at corner intersections. A man with a red brand selling fruit from a battered stall, a woman with multiple black forbidden brands tending a tiny garden in a cracked pot. People who knew Kael. No one asked about the white clothes. In the Undercity, he had observed, you learned not to ask. He arrived at a specific building with the worn carving of a crooked anchor above the door. The informal Undercity sign for a gathering place. A safe harbor. Father Drem was behind the counter. He was 60 years old, weathered, with eyes that had seen too much and decided to keep looking anyway. He was not a priest of anything official. He had simply lived in the Undercity for 60 years and taken the word father seriously. He saw the white clothes. Said only, ah. Kael said he could use something to eat. Father Drem was already moving. He told him to sit down. Later, the two of them sat at the counter with cups. Father Drem said he had heard the word NULL before. He said it appeared in old texts pre-Empire writings the church considered suppressed. He mentioned that they used to call people like that absence. Kael asked what had happened to them. Father Drem stared at his cup. He said the texts stopped recording them, and that this was usually not a good sign. Kael looked at his hands. Something was visible now barely, but there. Faint text scrolling across his skin, like ink suspended in water, cycling, dissolving before it could be read. Always beginning. Never completing. He noted to himself that the sensation was not pain. It was a presence. Like a room in a house he hadn't known existed, the door was open, air was moving through it, and something on the other side was paying attention. High above, in the window of the Reckoning Hall, Inquisitor Vale stood looking down at the Undercity. She was tall and severe, her black armor marked with gold inscriptions along every edge. She held a report. At the top of it was one word, NULL. She said to herself, very quietly, that a void that fills was a dangerous thing to set loose. It was dawn in the Undercity, and Kael was sitting on the roof of Father Drem's building. He had not slept. The tingling in his palms had gotten worse overnight, and by the time the dim light reached him it was unmistakable. Faint text scrolled across both palms, like ink in water, dissolving before it could be read. He had been awake all night trying to read it. He noted that it wasn't staying still long enough. He observed that it felt like it hadn't decided yet. Like he hadn't decided yet. A head of messy gray hair appeared over the rooftop edge. Ossian Crow was 16. Thin, wide-eyed, constitutionally incapable of being as afraid as situations warranted. His own reckoning was still a year away. He said Father Drem was worrying. Kael said, Father Drem worried as a hobby. Ossian sat down. He looked at Kael's hands and noted those were letters. Kael said yes. Ossian asked if he could read them. Kael said no. Ossian asked if they were dangerous. Kael said probably. Ossian said it was brilliant. Below, in the street, a young woman named Eravos 20. Slight, dark-haired, was seated against a wall with her knees drawn up, breathing in short, controlled bursts. A black forbidden brand marked her forearm. Two men were shouting at her to move. Kael stepped between her and the men. He said quietly that yesterday had been his reckoning. The men asked why he was still white. He said it was because the Arbiter couldn't weigh him. The men left. He crouched in front of Era. Her hands were shimmering a faint heat, mirage distortion, the cobblestones beneath her. Dissolving at the surface, he asked what was going on with the ground. She explained that her sentence was that she was someone who dissolved things. She lost control when she panicked. She had been sitting there because she was afraid to stand up. Then she told him she had dissolved her last pair of shoes. He offered his hand. She told him she might dissolve it. He said he might survive it. She took it. The shimmer stilled. Where their hands touched, the text on his palms stopped moving. For one breath, a single word held still, readable, dissolve. One breath. Then it faded back into the cycling current. He stared at his palm, unsettled, and asked himself what that had been. Later, in Father Drem's gathering place, the four of them sat around a big table. Kael, Ossian, Era, and Father Drem at the counter, pretending not to listen. He was absolutely listening. Era held her cup of soup, like a small warmth, and explained that she had received her sentence 2 years ago. She said they had let her stay in the upper city initially, because the classification committee had debated for 6 months whether dissolves counted as forbidden rather than merely destructive. Then she had dissolved a market stall during a panic attack, and they had reclassified her. Ossian said sympathetically that this seemed like a manufacturing defect in the classification system, rather than in her. She said, dry as old timber, that the committee had disagreed. Kael worked through what he had felt. He said that when their hands had touched, her control had steadied. He said he had felt it, something in him had absorbed the overflow, the part of her sentence that spilled when she panicked. He said it quietly to himself, the void that fills. Father Drem spoke without looking up from his counter. He said Kael had absorbed part of her sentence. He said those letters on Kael's hands were sentence fragments, and that Kael hadn't read her sentence, he had drunk a piece of it. They all looked at him. There was a silence. Ossian whispered that this was the most terrifying and incredible thing he had ever heard in his life. A knock at the door ended the moment. Father Drem moved to the barred window and looked through it. His expression did not change, but something went tight around his eyes. He told Kael quietly to use the back door, and to do it now. Kael asked who it was. Father Drem said it was a bailiff, a senior one, in full armor. Ossian went pale. Era gripped the edge of the table. Kael moved to the back door, opened it, and stopped. Inquisitor Vale was standing in the narrow alley. She was taller than the alley seemed designed to accommodate. Her black armor carried small gold inscriptions, along every edge the marks of a senior inquisitor, earned over years. A thin blade sat at her hip, not drawn. Her face was sharp. Her eyes were the exact color of a sky that had decided to produce lightning. In her hand, not a weapon, was a folded document. She looked at Kael without any readable expression. She told him she was not there to take him in. He did not move. He asked what she was there for. She said she was there because something worse than a bailiff was on its way. She said they had maybe 20 minutes before it arrived. Everyone had gathered in the back alley. Kael, Ossian, Era, Father Drem in the doorway. Vale stood before them. She didn't appear bothered by the audience. She said the short version was that Kael was not the first NULL. She said there had been 11 others before him in the 312 years since the Arbiter system was established. Ossian began to mention that Father Drem had said the records had stopped. Vale said. The records had stopped because the church had destroyed them. She stated that every previous null had been found and resolved before their ability developed past the early stage. Kael asked, flat, what resolved meant. Vale looked at him directly. She said it meant what he thought it meant. She said something was coming to do the same to him. She said it was a wraith, bailiff. At those words, Father Drem made a small involuntary sound. Era grabbed Kyle's arm. Ossian asked what a wraith bailiff was. Vale explained. She said that regular bailiffs were humans with sanctioned sentences, tasked with enforcing sentence law. She said wraith bailiffs were different. She explained that they were individuals whose sentences had been considered so dangerous that they were never meant to survive their own reckoning. Instead, she said, the Arbiters had taken them, had hollowed them out, had kept only the destructive core of their sentence, and given it one directive: find anomalies, find nulls, find anything that threatened the system's integrity. Father Drem said quietly that they had made weapons out of children. Vale said without flinching that yes, they had. Kael asked why she was warning him. He pointed out that she was a bailiff. He said she served the Arbiters. She looked down at the gold inscriptions on her own armor. She said she served the sentence system because it maintained order, and that there was a difference between the system and the people who administered it. She said she had been 15 years old when she was taken in as an Inquisitor candidate. She said she had been told that the Wraith program had been discontinued 200 years ago. She said she had found out yesterday that it had not. She said she didn't like being lied to. Kael held out his hands. Palms up. The text scrolled. Vale stared at it. Her eyes widened barely, but enough. She said he had already started absorbing. He pressed one palm against the alley wall. The stone beneath his palm softened hand-sized clean. He traced a line. It dissolved behind his finger, perfectly, like ink lifted from paper. He wrote his name. The letters dissolved one by one. He said it was his now, not borrowed but different from Era's original. He thought he could dissolve definitions. Labels. Things that decided what something was. He reached out and touched Era's forbidden brand. Didn't press, just touched. Under his fingertip, the brand shimmered the shimmer of something becoming undefined. Its edges lost their certainty. Era barely breathed. He pulled back. He said he didn't know how far it went. A single wrong sound came from above, not loud. Just wrong. Like the first crack in ice. Vale's hand went to her blade. She said it was there, 18 minutes early. She told the civilians to get inside. She told Kael to stay with her. He said he wasn't hiding. She said she hadn't said hide. She said with me. It descended from the upper city's edge without drama, simply present, as if the world had just agreed to acknowledge it. Roughly human-shaped with wrong proportions. Too tall, too narrow, as though something essential had been removed and the rest compressed inward. Its armor was not black like paint, but black like the absence of the possibility of light. A smooth mass covered its face. Dead sentence fragments orbited it slowly, power consumed and rendered inert, still circling out of. Residual gravity. Ansi human, very clearly no longer. Its voice was like paper tearing. It identified Kael by his null designation and stated that his status was an error to be corrected. Vale invoked paragraph 9 of the Reckoning Accord and identified herself as Senior Inquisitor. The Wraith said her clearance had been revoked that morning. Vale said, in a beat of pure cold clarity, of course it had. The Wraith moved. The impact wasn't physical, it hit somewhere deeper. Kael was thrown backward into the wall. It was reaching into him for the dissolved fragment. He grabbed the Wraith's arm. Not strategy, desperation. The dissolved fragment, instead of being extracted, went deeper. The stone beneath both of them softened. The wall behind. Everything within 2 meters began to dissolve slowly, inevitably, like old certainties being questioned all at once. The Wraith reared back. Its voice carried something recognizable for the first time. Confusion. It said nulls couldn't forcibly deepen. It wasn't possible, Kael said, through gritted teeth, that he wasn't doing it on purpose. Vale watched from the side. Pure calculation. She noted to herself that he had absorbed a fragment 12 hours ago and was already converting it.